Alright guys, today I'm going to be teaching some chuds about what Shrek is about, because apparently it's either hard to grasp or hard to accept what this movie is about and what it's trying to say. This will be done in 3 parts, and the first is about Farquaad. The first video is mostly about Farquaad and defending him and glazing him vehemently. So they say in their video,
in this movie, Farquaad is painted as the villain, but he is absolutely right. Farquaad is the only character with any selfless motivation in the entire movie. Because one of the things you see about Farquaad very quickly on is that his entire motivation is based around making Duloc, his own personal kingdom, as perfect as it can possibly be.
and they say, quote, "What Farquaad wants is order and perfection for his kingdom." Alright, I'm just going to read a few sections off the Duloc entry on the Shrek wiki. The citizens of Duloc live under a strict dictatorship commanded by Lord Farquaad, who spent his short existence trying to make the city and its surrounding territory artificially perfect, with symmetrical planning and rigid rules for the townspeople to follow. It also brings up a gift shop sold nothing but souvenirs with Lord Farquaad's likeness. Prior to Farquaad's plan to become a king, a large number of magical creatures used to live in Duloc together with the normal townspeople, but were ultimately banished to Shrek's swamp as a punishment. Okay, let me spell this out. Lord Farquaad is a villain in this story because 1. He is a totalitarian dictator seeking to make his personal kingdom perfect, artificially perfect as the wiki entry says, by rounding up and exiling all fairy tale creatures that he sees as, quote, trash and, quote, a poison. And 2, he seeks to attain more power by simply choosing a princess to marry from his bedroom and sending out the strongest man to go and fetch her for him. His desire for power, control, and having his, quote, perfect world is his top priority. He doesn't care about the fairy tale creatures, he never really cares about Fiona, and he's willing to put anyone else's life on the line for what he wants because that's a sacrifice he's willing to make. That's what makes him a villain. It's pretty straightforward. One of the first scenes we see is him torturing the gingerbread man. I feel like that's enough. So we're gonna move on to the second part of this. Shrek is the main character. You guys say that he's, quote, responsible for his horrible reputation. Okay. Shrek as a character exists to subvert the typical stereotypes found in fairy tales, especially the cleaner Disney versions. The story is subversive because it takes typical tropes and turns them around. Shrek, as a story, seeks to buck tradition and subvert our ideas around good, evil, and heroes and monsters. Subversion is one of the most used tools by artists, and for good reason. You're taking an idea or concept that people are accustomed to, and you're shaking it up somehow. You're causing them to confront what they've already known or experienced and think about things in a new way. Every artistic movement is in some way retaliating against what came before it, by adding or taking away from what was already there. When it comes to Shrek, the whole point is that there's more to him than the entrenched idea of what an ogre is. Ogres have layers. It's about as simple a metaphor as you could express. But for some reason, these brothers act confused by this, because they are refusing to see Shrek as layered. To them, he's an ogre, he's defined by his ogreness, and he cannot change. You are, by definition, living in a fairy tale world if you think this. They say in the first movie that Shrek, quote, terrorizes villagers, but that is patently false. Villagers seemingly regularly come into his swamp with torches and pitchforks to antagonize him and potentially kill him, and he scares them off time and time again. This reinforces the dynamic between him and Dulocians. This is a cyclical dynamic, a self-fulfilling prophecy, if I can say. First, people think he's a monster, and even as he's doing normal everyday things like fixing himself dinner, they think he's a monster. Then, they invade his swamp. Then, he knows how they view him, and he acts like a monster to get them to go away. Then, people continue to think he's a monster because of this. In the second movie, we see a variation of this self-fulfilling prophecy. The fairy godmother's conversation with Shrek is a great example of this. These guys say that she explains to him that ogres are inherently bad, and that Fiona isn't happy with him because she belongs not with an ogre, but with a human, Prince Charming. But here's what actually happens. Shrek and Fiona are having issues, largely because Shrek is feeling friction being far, far away, some self-imposed because of his difficulty adapting and insecurities, some put onto him by others, such as King Harold. Shrek goes to the fairy godmother for help, and she goes through a bunch of books that don't include ogres, having happy endings as proof that ogres don't deserve happy endings. Ogres don't live happily ever after, she says. This isn't some empirical proof, as these brothers say. She's just listing out fairy tales to make him feel even more like he doesn't belong and that he doesn't deserve happiness or needs to change fundamentally for Fiona and everyone else. He buys into the latter and drinks the potion, thinking this will solve his problems. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. What this shows is that Fairy Godmother is using these previous fairy tales as confirmation bias to say that because an ogre has never had a happily ever after before in these books, they can't have a happily ever after now or in the future. Fairy Godmother makes Shrek being an ogre the problem in the relationship, not a complex mix of stubbornness, deep insecurities, and societal friction. Because let's not forget, King Harold is conspiring the whole time with Fairy Godmother to push Shrek out of the picture. Society and its so-called rules are pushing Shrek away, and he not only feels that, he internalizes it as he has his whole life. And at the end of the day, King Harold himself's motivations are related to his own insecurity about being a frog prince. He was a prince, but was cursed and turned into a frog. His daughter was cursed at a young age, and he doesn't want her to be a, quote, monster, to be an outcast, like he was. But then come to find out, life had different plans. Fiona. My point on Fiona is pretty straightforward. These brothers talk a lot about King Harold and his deal with Fairy Godmother and Prince Charming. They lean a lot on that. But it's this simple. It wasn't their choice to make. Well, according to fairy tale logic, I guess it was. But again, we're talking about a story that is actively subverting fairy tale tropes. In a typical fairy tale, Prince Charming would swoop in, save the princess, slay the dragon, marry her, and they'd live happily ever after. Simple. But, ironically, because of your good, benevolent leader, Farquaad, Shrek is sent instead, and Fiona and him fall for each other. And why? Because 1, there's a lot more to Shrek that meets the eye. Again, this is the point of the first movie. And 2, this part gets overlooked, there's more to Fiona than meets the eye. They bond because they can be their full selves with each other, and they accept each other. Prince Charming is a cutout. He's the stereotypical pretty boy, knight in shining armor, but he's ultimately pretty vacuous. He seems more interested in his own appearance and status, while Shrek has layers. He simply had a princess promised to him by his mom and the king of far, far away, but Fiona never got a say. She never got a say over whether she'd be locked away in isolation her whole life, and she's never gotten a say in who she'd marry. Which brings me to my first main point. Fiona's curse is a social curse. In my opinion, it's not really about her being a literal monster or ogre, just like the point of Shrek isn't that he is an ogre. It's that he's different and is pushed away from society despite there being more to him. Fiona wasn't cursed by a witch as a girl to become an ogre, but to become an outcast. And when this happens, her parents decide that the best thing for her is to hide away in a castle all by herself. She was their daughter, and yet instead of finding a way to deal with this new issue, they hid her away from everyone for years with the hopes that one day a man in shining armor would come and save her. But something else happened. Someone else came along that would accept her no matter what, and more importantly, she chose him. Which is completely missed in all 3 of these Shrek critique videos, is that Fiona has agency. She chose to be with Shrek, and she chose to take her ogre form for the rest of the series. But to these brothers, Fiona has been stolen or corrupted by Shrek, and that's ridiculous. Fiona is someone who's been told she's a monster for most of her life, literally having been trapped in a tower by her parents, all alone from childhood into adulthood. And of course, she's internalized this idea. This is what she's talking to Donkey about when Donkey sees her in her nightly form. It's a spell. When I was a little girl, witch cast a spell on me.
Every night I become this horrible, ugly beast. I'll just marry whoever I want. Take a good look at me, Donkey. I mean, really. Who could ever love a beast so hideous and ugly? Princess and ugly don't go together. That's why I can't stay here with Shrek.
Fiona's whole goal in Shrek 1 is to be rescued and freed from her curse. But in a way, Shrek 1 challenges the goal itself. That's what a subversive story does. It challenges the premises that we've come to accept. Can an ogre find love? Can an ogre fall in love with a princess? Can an ogre even be the main character? Can a loudmouth donkey be a sidekick instead of a big stoic stallion? Can a girl who sees herself as a monster accept herself? Yes, subversion is the point, and subversion in art is valuable and important because it makes art better and can even make us better, and because it makes guys like these triggered AF. Because let's be honest, these guys are more interested in pushing their weirdo, half-baked, basement-dwelling, edgelord, white nativist takes than engaging with these films or anything else in any real way.
Like, if Trump deported all the illegals, cleaned up all the major cities, and got rid of the fent zombies, I would happily worship him as the god emperor of mankind.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to preserve your own home, unless you're ethnically European, of course.
But look, I'm just an artist myself that wants to promote art and good, healthy discourse around it, and I just know that whatever the heck these guys are doing is, well, it's bad discourse. It's barely critique, and in the realm of critique, it's very weak and outright overlooks the core themes of these movies, so I felt like I had to get the dry erase board out and start teaching some fools. Anyway, I'll be over here on this channel trying different things out, and if you're interested, stay tuned. If not, no worries. This is Velo Media. I'm out.